All right. Okay. Yes. So here, week 1, anti-inflammatory nutrition. Before I start, I want to ask you, you can tell me just one tip. What is anti-inflammatory nutrition? What you understand from anti-inflammatory nutrition? Lupe, you go.
Yeah, I knew you were going to pick it on me today. What I understand?
Oh, what do you think it is?
It's foods that, I don't know, are going to make you feel better and reduce inflammation.
Yeah, no,
yeah?
that's a pretty, yeah,
Oh.
it's it really is I think in a nutshell. So in order to understand a little bit of inflammations, let's get some context here. So September is Arthritis Awareness Month in Canada. So that's why I put a little bit of the context here on how we're living with arthritis in Canada. So 1 in 5 Canadians live with arthritis. And so according to Arthritis Society, up to 6 million people are living with arthritis. And so osteoarthritis is the most common form of arthritis. But if you think about the most common inflammatory arthritis, we have rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's syndrome, ankylosing spondylitis. So that's kind of pretty high. And what I wanted to highlight in this little graphic here is that it's most common in women. We're so lucky, right? And but men also get, and it can affect all ages, right? It's not just the old people's disease. So the autoimmune diseases, it's really at a state of chronic inflammation. Inflammation in itself is a healthy process, right? So you get a cut, you need an inflammation, a cascade of like reaction to heal that wound, and that's inflammation. But when we have autoimmune diseases, that inflammation is like we're always in an emergency mode, like there's always that inflammation is there. And so that immune system launches that attack on healthy tissues. And so that's why when we have inflammatory arthritis, that chronic inflammation can lead to joint damage and affect other organs. And it's so specific to each like individual autoimmune condition. So you take a Sjogren's, it really attacks our eyes, our mouth, could be our liver, our lungs are very sensitive. And rheumatoid arthritis, it could attack anything. And lupus, we know that the kidney is a very, very sensitive organ that it could attack. But not only we have the autoimmune conditions and the inflammation, but many of us also kind of suffer from fibromyalgia. And even though this is not considered an autoimmune disease yet, this being studied, it is a medical condition that is believed to affect the central nervous system. So it's sometimes so difficult to pinpoint what is the cause of that fibromyalgia pain. What we know is that there's always widespread pain that lasts more than 6 to 3 months. We experience extreme fatigue, sleep disturbances, brain fog, mood swings, poor memory, and migraine. And when you think about it, don't we on our own conditions kind of feel the same? And sometimes all these symptoms overlap and we know what is really attacking us.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just going to say, that's all me.
Right? So one thing I really wanted to bring home is that every time we think of a flare-up, it's, oh my God, it's something that I ate. Oh, it's the dinner that last night. Oh, it's like, so we always kind of blame the food because it's the one thing we have control over, right? But when you think about what triggered your disease, was it food? Mine was triggered by injury and a virus. So there are many other other aspects or factors that exacerbate a flare-up. It could be weather changes. We can beat the weatherman anytime, right? Poor sleep, infections, I find that sometimes because we had to juggle between like family, work, disease, it gets so stressful that brings me a flare up sometimes. Like I don't know how to deal with this. Diet and lifestyle choices, hormonal changes for sure. And sometimes when we feel super good, right? Like, oh my God, I had the best day. I'm just going to climb a mountain. Boom. We again exacerbate our condition. So, something that it really caught my attention was that hormonal changes are a funny thing because as I was reading some research, when we, during pregnancy, there's an increase in estrogen and progesterone levels. And actually, that with elevated levels of cortisol and vitamin D, they seem to be um, anti-inflammatory, right? So and that's why a way to protect the baby, right? So our body kind of goes into a lower immune system, so the baby gets protected. But then similar things happen is when we're about to get our period, our estrogen levels drop, and that could be linked to more pain. But I think we still need to understand more on how we can modify or how we can cope with those changes, those hormonal changes, especially around our menstrual period. So that's something to think about when we're thinking about what can cause a flare up. So I invite you to read Eileen Davidson. One of her blog posts that I really enjoyed was that she wrote about the most painful time of the month, living with rheumatoid arthritis and getting my period. So here I wanted to hear from you, what are your main triggers?
Well, I was just taking notes of some of the things you were saying because it's really, I guess, kind of resonating with me. I always blame my flare-ups on diet. And so I guess I need to explore other options more than just blaming myself. But, as a parent, especially, we tend to guilt ourselves when we're going through chronic illness because we have other things in ourselves to look after. So I would say just like what's going on, like situational, my triggers definitely are stress. Like yesterday, my cat got attacked by a raccoon and had to have surgery. That sent me into a huge, huge flare. And yeah, and then when I'm stressed, I eat bad. And then I create a flare, and then I go through this cycle of self-blame, and then I get into a depressive state, and it just goes into the pain cycle. But yes, the article I wrote about my period and how it affects my RA is definitely one thing I noticed. I will link that article. I was just searching for it for you. I've gone into a lot of depth about what I've noticed by tracking my health with a Fitbit and participating in research and kind of what that's taught me about my rheumatoid arthritis, including like diet, my period, exercise.
Yeah, and I hope little kitten is okay. I'm so sorry.
Oh, he is. I'm just, making sure he's alive because he's very asleep right now. And he did not sleep last night, so I didn't sleep.
Oh, no, thank you for sharing, Eileen. What about Tara?
My biggest trigger is always stress. That's the number one thing that will send me over into a flare. Weather has a huge impact as well. I live in an area that we have high heat and lots of rain. And you're right, I'm basically a walking barometer on a regular basis. I can tell you when it's getting ready to rain. Over time, I found there's certain foods that can trigger. If I go overboard with eating gluten-containing foods, that will also trigger a flare.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Thank you. What about Lupe? What's your bigger trigger?
It's everything that you guys mentioned. It's stress. It's I always also blame it on what I eat. Because when I eat really healthy, I feel like a million bucks. But then because I feel really good, right, for a couple of weeks, oh, I'm just going to have a cookie, or I'm just going to have a piece of chocolate or a Coke or something like that, you know, and then it all adds up, right? So I think a lot of it for me is diet and stress also.
We also need to remember that sugar is addictive.
Yeah.
You can't just self-blame. That it is an actually addictive substance.
Yeah.
It is true. It's like it really acts on our like a reward system, right? Like a high fat food, sugar and salt. It really seems to kind of increase that kind of pleasure, and it goes back to like our cave times. And sugar is delicious. I have like a sweet tooth, and it's so hard to get rid of it. But there are strategies, though. There are strategies that we kind of learned through this program on how to cope with it. So thank you, ladies, for sharing. So let's go and start talking more about what is an anti-inflammatory nutrition. And it's not, but before that, think about this. Won't you get overwhelmed with all the information? Yesterday, I created a reel, and my point was to, whenever if there's a diet that promises you to cure all your autoimmune diseases, be careful, right? Because even there's some commonalities, there's still so much like difference in your lifestyle and how your body's reacting to foods. So you can't just kind of generalize. And so one follower says, "Oh, where can I get those books?" I said, "Oh my goodness." Didn't get the message. So, and this time is what we call the diet culture. It's like they come out with one trendy diet after the other. And because the autoimmune diseases are on the rise, so no wonder why some people just come out with their solution. So no wonder why we feel so overwhelmed, and why it's so hard to ignore that constant harmful narrative that we need to be a certain size to be healthy, or the harm caused by labeling our foods as healthy and good, or bad and junk. So it's no wonder why everyone seems to be searching for the next best diet. So it may be tempting to adopt a trendy diet, but what happens with these trendy diets is that sometimes they just focus on one food or one nutrient. Let's say like the paleo or the keto diet, that they seem to really focus on like animal products and proteins, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? So to what to watch for.
I have 2 of those. They're still in the shelf. I've never read them.
I do too, and I've never read them. And you can go to Value Foods or any thrift store and buy them.
Yes. It's like, why do I buy them?
I feel that there's some areas there that I could share. Maybe I had the autoimmune system recovery plan, the autoimmune solution. There are certain chapters that I do appreciate, which is the tracking your symptoms and keeping those journals. Some of the stress management type of therapies, I find that valuable. But when it comes down to the food, it just seems too restrictive, that you have to follow this meal plan or die kind of thing. The autoimmune solution, for instance, by Amy Myers, I added up the supplements that she was suggested, and that book, maybe I bought it 5 years ago. It added up to $1,000. It's like, are you kidding me? so am I eating or am I taking supplements? So those are the things that we really need to think about. And so like this one is a fairly new one, and it's an anti-inflammatory diet detox. So whenever you see a detox, it's like a warning sign, because our bodies are capable of detoxing. That's why we have liver, lungs, and kidney. So, and then in combination of intermittent fasting. So imagine how complicated that's going to be. And honestly, what is an anti-inflammatory nutrition? It's going back to basics, and it's the Mediterranean way of eating. because it's the original plant-based diet, it's the original anti-inflammatory nutrition and way of eating, because it's not really a diet, it's a lifestyle. It's supposed to kind of get you into enjoying foods, enjoying flavors, and really be there, socialize with your family, have meals with friends and your kids, go to the farmers market and work and walk. Like it's all about a lifestyle. But then most recently, as we know more about the gut microbiome, so it's like a combination of the Mediterranean way of eating principles plus gut health promoting foods. That's really an anti-inflammatory nutrition in a nutshell. And here's where I really want to highlight that when there are too many restrictions or eliminations as a part of a diet, it can lead to binges, right? So you're feeling like that you're missing something. And when you're feeling sad or you're feeling stressed, you go and binge usually on cookies or cake. I don't know, that's me. You're not gonna go you're not gonna go and binge on kale, right?
Sometimes I do. Kale chips in the air fryer.
Right?
In the air fryer.
Yes, with a little bit of
Oh.
olive oil and
Yeah.
then salt and pepper.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eileen. I'm going to do that. I'm not a big fan of kale, but I've been really kind of warming up to it.
It's what I do instead of potato chips.
Yeah. I like that.
That's awesome. And so just think about that when we are thinking of all this restriction, it's put a lot of pressure on our mental health. Not only we're dealing with our autoimmune conditions, but we also put in all this pressure, and it can actually lead to eating disorders. So those elimination diets, you really need to be careful, especially with someone who had a history of eating disorders or they're prone to that, because that's gonna make things worse. So the anti-inflammatory diet really encourages you to eat the majority of foods from the fruit and vegetable group, with particular attention to the leafy greens, the berries, and all those fruits and vegetables that are high in phytochemicals. And we have to consider that food, it modulates the inflammatory gene expression. So it reduces the pro-inflammatory activity. I really love this about talking about the standard American diet, and I always say this the sad diet, right? It's like the Western diet, but we have an increased amount of like animal protein, refined sugars, excess salt, highly processed foods, and of course there's less fiber and antioxidants. So that leads to weight gain, central obesity, more fatigue. And that's what you feel when you kind of binge on all these foods. It's like it's a vicious cycle. You feel even more drained. Then you also decrease the beneficial gut bacteria or microbiome and increase the inflammatory response, and also affects the effectiveness of your medications. And I think there was a small study when it shows some of the pro-inflammatory diet and taking like biologics, it could impact the effectiveness of the treatment. So let's talk about like anti-inflammatory foods a little bit. So let's break it down. So first of all, when you think about, it's like when you are craving something and you go into the pantry and all you see is chips, right? Well, that's what you're gonna eat, just chips.
So buy them.
It's easier.
Exactly, exactly. So that's the thing. It's like anything that's like within your like field of vision, like making sure to just kind of have this pantry packed with anti-inflammatory foods and things that are very basic. Get your olive oil, dried pulses or like legumes, beans and lentils, garbanzo beans, nuts and seeds, whole grains. So if there are always in your pantry, so you're always going to have the ingredients to prepare your anti-inflammatory foods. So this is what I've been working for the past 4 weeks. And so it's like building your anti-inflammatory plate. So I'm going to try to break it down into steps. So I did a little bit of analogy earlier before Eileen stepped in, that when we teach salsa in North America, we go by the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so I started to think maybe I need to teach a little bit of salsa here with the anti-inflammatory plate. As you can see, this particular meal is a very traditional Colombian meal. You can see that. Would you eat it?
Looks yummy. Yeah.
It's very simple and very cheap. Like anti-inflammatory nutrition shouldn't be expensive. So it's lentils. It's a beet salad with cilantro and boiled egg. It's a plantain kind of stir-fried in olive oil and cinnamon. And then we have the cooked rice with curcumin or turmeric and green onions. Simple and honestly quick to make, and you can make maybe 2 or 3 bowls for the next 3 days.
May I ask what type of rice you use?
I like parboiled rice.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that kind.
Hard boiled?
Parboiled rice. So that rice is almost like a mix between the white rice and the wild rice. Personally, I'm not too crazy about wild rice, which is like the full, like whole grain. But the parboiled rice, it seems to be a little bit like, I find it tastier, still preserve most of the nutrients, and it's a low glycemic grain. So when you consume it, it doesn't raise your blood sugar kind of right away compared to white rice. So I will give you a list. You guys are going to get this resource at the end of the session. Okay. My hard labor work.
Like my son absolutely loves rice. So I always feel guilt when I eat it because he prefers the white rice, where I always want to buy the brown or basmati, right? So I'm definitely going to try this on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a trick with white rice, and I'll teach you one.
Ooh.
A little better one. Yeah, there is a trick. So there you go. All right. So here are the steps. We want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's like so many others, but these are the main ones. So always building that your anti-inflammatory plate. It's keeping in mind it's a combination. You got to see the meal as a whole, because the more we study the Mediterranean diet and their effects on the gut microbiome, they're seeing that it's a synergy on all the nutrients. It's not just protein, it's not just carbohydrates, it's not just fat. In fact, there are certain foods that contain all of them. Think about the humble beans. Humble beans contain carbohydrates, contain fiber, contain protein. So it's like the whole package there. But the way we're being or the way I seen it here in North America is that we classify by protein. Oh, this is the meat group. This is the dairy group. And this is and I think that's where we kind of fail to get a variety of foods when we start classifying just per nutrient or per component. So let's start. So one thing I want to highlight is that if you ever heard of the low glycemic index or the glycemic index?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah.
You heard that? So just as a refresher, right? The glycemic index is a tool to measure how carbohydrates affect the blood glucose levels. So if it's low, it's 55 or less. So the measure, it measures from 1 to 100. And actually, the way that they measure is like one slice of white bread has like 100. And so that's like the measure that they take. So anything kind of below that slice of white bread, they start classifying the foods. So low is 55 or less, medium is 56 or 69, and high is more than 70. So ideally, what we want to include more of in our meals, it's low to medium glycemic foods. And that's why on each group, I will highlight and I actually added into my tool mainly the low and medium glycemic foods. And I think this is very important because not only inflammation affects us as having autoimmune conditions, but we're also more prone to develop other chronic illnesses like hypertension, diabetes because of the medications, insulin resistance. So by including these types of carbohydrates, we are reducing the risk of insulin resistance and therefore less inflammation. So you see, it's like a whole package. Isn't it exciting? I see. So let's start with the vegetables, right? So in season, preferably. Honestly, when it comes to organic or non-organic, it doesn't really make much of a difference. I think what it makes a lot of a difference is if you can get local foods and wash those vegetables for more than 20 seconds under the cold water. Sometimes organic foods are extremely expensive. It's like not really worth it. If you can access it, great, right? But
The
if
other
you
problem with
can't,
organic food, sorry, is
Mhm.
that half the time in the grocery stores, they're not ripe anymore because they've been sitting for so long.
Mhm. It's true, right? And then you count the traveling time that they're coming from us, they're coming from California. So I rather go like during this time, I go for like Foodland, Ontario. I'm in Ontario. So I try to get my vegetables from Foodland, Ontario when they are available because I know they're going to be rich. I used to love papaya back home in Colombia, but it's not going to be the same papaya here in Canada. So think about that. I know like the idea is to really savor your meals, but I know many times people ask me, but what is a serving? How much should I eat, right? So for vegetables, ideally you want to include up to 5 servings per day. But even if you haven't eaten any vegetables at all and you include 1 or 2 a day, that's a win. So it's just one step at a time. And I wanted to highlight the root vegetables because they are also a source of carbohydrates and energy and other nutrients like magnesium and potassium that might be even richer than other vegetables. These ones who are in black is because they only have less than 15 grams of carbohydrates. So they don't really have any impact on the blood sugars. But then here, when you have carrots, um, actually, I learned something. When they're raw carrots, they're low glycemic foods. When they're boiled, they become medium glycemic foods. So it kind of the carbohydrates breaks down a little bit with the cooking method. So something just to keep in mind. Just eat a rainbow. We always hear that. The phytochemicals that they always contain each group of colors, like all the colors, they contain specific antioxidants and phytochemicals. Lycopene, for instance, is a great one that specifically for us, so some of us who suffer Sjogren's and have, oh, I'm gonna get Nicole here. Sorry, got our little lady. So lycopene is one of those antioxidants that you actually get more of it when the vegetables are cooked, right? When you get red peppers or tomatoes and they're cooked, and even more, you get more out of it when you cook it in extra virgin olive oil and you add some garlic and onions, a little bit of black pepper and salt. So it's that, again, that synergy of components that even increases the anti-inflammatory effect. So we have other sorts of anthocyanins, carotenoids, chlorophyll, and beta carotene. So all of these have a specific functions and like eye health. They could combat like cancer, and that's why, and a lot of research related to cancer, it has to do a lot with phytochemicals. So don't be afraid of your tomatoes, honestly, and your potatoes if they're not a trigger for you. So this is just to show you that eating kind of a balanced meal, it doesn't have to be so so difficult, right? You can have like a no recipe meal, and you include, here I added boiled eggs, some hummus, tomatoes, cucumbers. I think I added some kind of lettuce in there. So if you have those ingredients and you are not feeling that great or don't have a lot of energy, but as long as you kind of follow those steps, then you're making sure that you're nourishing yourself. Here I have some zucchini salad. When you're kind of dressing up your smoothie bowl, right, with extra nuts, hemp seeds. Here I have some of the paneer. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's a type of cheese that's really high in protein. I have some salmon here. This is a recipe I created for the Arthritis Society. And another thing I wanted to highlight, let's say you like your waffles, right? You really love your Eggo waffles. And you want to enjoy that with your kids. But like, how can you maybe make it more anti-inflammatory? So you make like what is it called here? Like a berry jam with chia seeds, right? And you add some hemp seeds, and in a way that's adding some anti-inflammatory foods to your food, to the foods that you're more used to. So that's another way to make changes, just gradual changes. Doesn't have to be overnight. So here again, we come with the fruits, and something I wanted to highlight is, what is a fruit serving? Which one do you think is the fruit serving of like an apple?
A little bowl.
Little bowl. Yeah, and what about out of these three apples? Like, which one is the one serving?
A small one.
The small one, yeah. This big orange is like 3 servings. So we often think that getting those maybe 5 servings of fruit is like, oh, it's so hard to get it, but really the amount is not that big, right? And now this is a trivia question. Think of a fruit that can be a low, medium, and high glycemic food.
Strawberry.
Carrots? Close.
Oh, I guess strawberries, but no, carrots, yeah. What about melon, like cantaloupe?
Nope. I will show you. Our precious banana. So let's call it the curious case of bananas and inflammation. So as we learn more about resistant starches, so those are like the starches that actually don't get digested by the the gut for energy. Sorry, for energy. It actually gets fermented by the gut bacteria. So when we have green plantains or green bananas, we actually consuming a low glycemic food. When it kind of turns yellow, it ripens a little bit. It turns into a medium glycemic food. But then when it's in this state, it definitely, that carbohydrate is ready to kind of rise your blood sugar right away. So there may be some truth when some people say, hey, don't eat banana, that's too bad for your diabetes. It really depends on the type of banana you're eating. So what do you think about your bananas now?
Well, it's funny because I don't typically like bananas once they're in the more yellow stage. I prefer them when they're still a bit on the green side. So maybe that just says something about how they are for me naturally.
I agree with that. I like them between green and yellow. I don't like them too yellow, and right here on the right, forget it. I just throw them away.
I use them in my garden then. They're good for the soil.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. And for banana bread.
Okay, so all right. I have a question then. Say, because sometimes instead of making ice or having ice cream, I will make it out of frozen banana. Is that technically too high on the glycemic level and potentially creating inflammation?
It technically is compared to others, but again, it's that natural sugar. And then if you have that nice cream, right?
Mhm.
And then let's say if instead you combine it like with Greek yogurt, with something that is like a low glycemic food. And so that actually increases a little bit of the, sorry, it lowers the glycemic index. When you mix some of the high glycemic foods with low glycemic or medium glycemic foods, so it also makes like a good combination. So that's what I kind of don't want to demonize all the foods, but also kind of making those combinations so there's a better balance.
Yeah, my son asked to do that yesterday. It was the most adorable thing. He's like, "What about taking bad for us recipes and making them good, Mom?" I'm like, "Well, yes, we tried that." So
So cute. I wanna one day just gonna hold Jacob. So you coming with me, coming with me, Jacob. So that was just an interesting. So another thing that we always like, oh my God, grains are so bad. So here is where I wanted to highlight that grains are really, there's a saying, some of the authors about, they're passionate about the Mediterranean diet, and they say, if vegetables make up the soul of the traditional Mediterranean cuisine, then grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds comprise the body. So it's so important. It's almost like a building, really a building, and that foundation. And grains, before, yeah, we used to get, oh, you need 7 to 8 servings of grains. Now, as we study more the gut microbiome, is that at least if you can include 3 servings of grains a day, it will be sufficient to provide those vitamins, minerals, and fibers that are essential to actually, we'll say, like a breakdown your carbohydrates and get more energy. So when I get you the resource, you're going to see the breakdown of the low glycemic foods, medium glycemic foods, and as like I mentioned here, there, I believe I think it's not listed here, the rice, the parboiled rice, the one that I mentioned. So it's a low glycemic food. But then when you mix this grain with legumes like beans and chickpeas, then it balances out and lowers the the glycemic index even more. So that's where like all these combinations are so important. Here's a little bit of an idea what a serving looks like. Do you guys eat a little bit of this, a little bit more? How does it look like?
A little more.
A little bit more, a lot of more.
Yeah, a lot of more.
Right.
So for next time when you see your plate, it's like don't take it and cut it in half. It's like maybe take off 2 or 3 tablespoons, right? And it's slowly go ease into it.
And then the cereal, if you have milk left, you have to add more cereal.
I know, right? I was like, come on. So it's so true. But I don't know, this cereal was one of those things that here in North America, I still not really used to it that much. But I can see my boy now having cereal, so I'm making sure that I'm getting like a whole grain cereal. And one thing that you can look at when it comes to whole grain. So are you familiar with the symbol with the Whole Grain Council?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that symbol, like sometimes you want to look for like whole grain ingredients. Sometimes if it says like a whole wheat, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a whole grain. It might have like a mixture. But a quick way to look if a cereal or bread is a whole grain is you look at this symbol. It says whole grain. It's mostly, we don't see that a lot with the gluten-free products. Because they are a little bit more kind of difficult to make them mix. But some of the products do contain that. And I could develop a list of some of the products that you can find. It can meet that criteria if you follow a gluten-free diet. So here, legumes. So traditionally back home, the meat was for the men. I don't know. We didn't eat meat. Apparently, women didn't deserve to eat meat. But guess what? Women, we are a little bit healthier than our uncles and grandfathers. um, because most of our diet was based on legumes and grains and vegetables, fruits and vegetables. Nuts and seeds, I have to admit personally, I got to eat more of those here in North America. We didn't really have that much access back home. So even for me, I have included certain foods that they were not familiar with my culture. So slowly I will include some of those seeds in my cereals and my smoothies, salads, just to add a little bit of crunch. And there's a lot of conversations about fats, right? And I only say it took me many years to really understand this and to get used to that olive oil is king. And the reason why is because that's the traditional oil. When the studies came around about Mediterranean diet, and even though they have a higher um, amount, they consume more fat compared to other dietary patterns, but the main source of the diet or the fat came from extra virgin olive oil. And it's not only that they're monounsaturated fats, but it's the polyphenols, what is it, the antioxidant component in the olive oil, because they come strictly from juicing the olives. That's very unique to having other oils coming like from avocado, grapeseed, right? So that's why the extra virgin olive oil is so unique when it comes to the anti-inflammatory diet or nutrition. I included in our handout that sometimes some people don't really have a feel for extra virgin olive oil because the taste could be a little bit strong. Did you find that?
I love it.
I love it now, but I know for some it could be really strong if they never had it before. So
I
starting
hate
with the lime,
olives,
you hate olives.
but I love olive oil.
That's okay. That's okay. When it comes to avocado, I always say, eat the avocado instead of the avocado oil. I find it very expensive and not necessarily is going to be maybe better than the extra virgin olive oil. Coconut oil, I think it's controversial. I see some properties that you want to add some variety to your diet, and it really complements some flavors, right? If you kind of cooking some Thai cuisine, some Asian cooking, like coconut oil really goes very well with it. But coconut oil has also like a medium chain fatty acids, which are a little bit more easy to digest than any other polyunsaturated fat. The other thing about coconut oil seems to be beneficial, especially when you do more like a oil pulling in your mouth, to decrease the inflammation in those who have periodontal disease or like us with Sjogren's syndrome. It seems to reduce the plaque that accumulates in your mouth. So coconut oil is one of those that I'm okay with it. I see other benefits. What about animal products? Do you eat any? Do you miss them? Like, how do you incorporate your animal products?
I eat eggs at breakfast.
Eggs, that's an excellent source of protein, and I love it. And also antioxidants that are helpful for the eye vision. Always kind of keep in mind that now animal product, if you love them, like let them be like the side dish, not like the main dish, like a 8 to 12 ounce of steak. You just have like maybe some strips that you can add to your stir fry if you still kind of miss that taste of meat. So try to do that, and maybe more like a once a week instead of like 2 or 3 times a week. Now, I also incorporate the dairy products and the Mediterranean diet favors more like the fermented foods, like the fermented type of products, so like a yogurt, kefir, and cheese. And it's not like the portion is really not that big. This is, you can see that's the cheese, like a one serving. But if you are not tolerating dairy products, then go for like a plant-based beverages that actually gives you some nourishment. Not because it's a plant-based beverage, it's not. It's going to nourish you or have like a good. They're nutritionally dense. So one of my favorite plant-based beverages are like hemp milk and sweetened soy milk. And there's one a milk made by Silk. It's called the almond and cashew protein milk, which is fortified with pea protein.
Can I ask about oat milk? Because that one seems to be really trendy right now.
Oatmeal is another one of those components. You wanna go and check. It's actually oatmeal is it's so trendy, and again, it's part of like our heritage and cultural foods like back home. Like when you do like the Caribbean and Latin American, we're used to have drinks made out of oats. So you can actually get some of the protein out of the grain, but again, check out the nutrition labels. If it's really going to give you per serving, if it's more than at least 5 grams, then it's worth it. I always kind of go by the protein levels. Because usually, okay, they're oat and it's an alternative, but basically it has 0 protein levels, maybe 45 with calcium, not all of them, or vitamin D. And so then ultimately it's nothing. It's just an
Okay.
expensive water.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Right?
Thank you.
No problem. And of course, start spicing up your meals and don't be afraid to experiment. And I prefer the use of natural sweeteners like a cane sugar, maple syrup, honey, rather than artificial sweeteners because we still don't know what is the long-term effect of artificial sweeteners on our gut microbiome because the gut microbiome cannot do anything with it. And it also gives that false sense of fullness and after consuming something with an artificial sweetener, you actually feel like eating something else because it didn't really feed that need of glucose that fed your brain or your tissues. So you're going to grab something that is going to satisfy that craving.
For me, it leaves an aftertaste that I don't like.
Yeah, I don't like it either.